Hey guys, how's it going? Look, I don't say this often enough, but you're just looking really great today. I mean, is that a new shirt? Did you do something with your hair? It's good, it's really good. So listen, I was planning on recording this a few days ago, but it's been a pretty hectic week for me. Most of you have probably seen by now that Koji Fox was kind enough to give us a summary on the official forums of the hour-long lore spotlight from the 2015 anniversary broadcast. We were pretty naive, I gotta say, to expect a live translation or subtitles in hindsight, but honestly, it was pretty frustrating to stay up and watch this only to spend the whole hour tearing our hair out. I know I wasn't the only one. Anyway, I'll reiterate what Koji noted in his post. This is a pretty loose summary, not an actual transcript, and I've decided that rather than just sitting here and reading the post out for you, because that would be completely redundant, it might be more interesting for us to actually retrace the steps of the broadcast, give a summary of what was being discussed at each point, and see if we can't embellish on it a little, where appropriate, of course, because this was basically a lore tour of the three Alliance states, with stops at various major landmarks, and given that it was focused on the 2.0 areas, most of what was said was supplementary to what we already know, but we did get a bit of insight into the design process, which was cool, and a couple of responses to things that the community has been recently speculating. First stop, so it wasn't until the A Realm Reborn alpha test that Yoshi P was running through the cities and decided that there should be a visual aid for players outside each guild to easily recognize them, and so he asked the art team to come up with some flags with a pretty short deadline, and the lore team had to really scramble to make a coherent explanation. So as a result, the flags for the martial disciplines in Uldar are based on the Flame of Might from the Immortal Flame sigil, which makes sense. Oda and Koji here noticed something quite interesting, that there are basically two major avenues by which lore is generated. Firstly, that the lore team comes up with an idea and has the devs implement it, and secondly, as is the case here, that the devs decide they want a certain feature in the game and the lore team has to work to make it fit naturally and coherently into the world. Oda also told us that the plaque of this Mikote outside the Pugilist Guild is not some champion or former guildmaster, but actually just a former student that Hamon fancied and was actually a pretty mediocre fighter, which is classic Hamon. Next up was the 80 Sins of Sacem. We have all been asking and speculating for the longest time regarding the background of Sacem and what these sins might have been. Koji confirmed here that he has actually written a quest line explaining this, and he's been trying to get it into the game now for some time, but that if they hadn't implemented it by the 3rd year anniversary, he'll tell us the story at that time, so look forward to that in another 12 months. Also notable here is that there are actually only 77 steps, and 3 have been lost to earthquakes and erosion, swallowed by the desert or whatever. The Japanese name for this landmark is simply the 80 Steps of Sacem, and it's one of the rare names in the game that actually had an English name first, which was translated to Japanese rather than vice versa. The Silent King, as we know, are ruins of Beladaya, and Oda suggested to us here that the nearby side quest, The Greatest Story Never Told, would tell us a lot about its past via solving riddles, which were evidently a translation nightmare for pretty obvious reasons. The exciting thing here, at least to me, was that while a lot of us have been hearing a name in Heavensward, the Miyachi, during post-50 job quests and speculating that this might be the Proto-Beladaya and the third nation of black mages involved in the War of the Magi, Oda confirmed this for us here. He mentioned them again here at High Bridge, talking about how their architectural design influenced that of Beladaya, Sildir, and Uldar, but also addressing a recent speculation that the Temple of Khan and the aqueducts of Azus La share a common origin. They do not, despite the repeat of assets from the former to the latter, so I guess that leaves us plenty to discover about the early pre-Magitech history of Allag. So the Mirage Capital was apparently to the northwest of Morderna in a region called the Yafayam Saltmoor. Its survivors founded Beladaya, and there was an implication here somewhere that we would be learning a lot more about the War of the Magi in the very near future, whether this is in reference to the Void Ark, something else in 3.1, or even a little further down the track. We'll find out soon enough. Last for Thanalin was Thal's Respite, and a quick comment on how the traders gnarled Thal are two aspects of a single god representing profit and wealth on both sides of the veil, as I recently explored in a video of my own. The Vilbran tour started at the Madman Bridge, so the name for this in Japanese is Lost Child Bridge or simply Lost Bridge. because the creek bed beneath it was supposed to have been dried up as a result of the calamity, and the bridge was subsequently supposed to seem lost or out of place. The devs decided, however, that they didn't like the look of the dry riverbed, so they filled it, and the lore team had to scramble to come up with another story for the name. They decided that it could be a cautionary tale for children of Limsa, that if they were to cross this bridge, they would have traveled too far from the city and might become lost. Koji decided to take this a step further in the English and call it the Madman Bridge, because those returning would be so traumatized by what they saw that they would be driven mad. Yep, traumatized by all those scary dodos. Then we had some talk about the God's Grip. But before the calamity, this land was shaped like a U with Morrowby Bay in the middle and a lighthouse on each headland, Ocean's Torch and Limlayan's Ring gripping the area like a closed hand, hence the name. But the area got smashed up pretty badly. Limlayan's Ring is no longer accessible by land, and it seems that the grip has effectively loosened. Mochizuki asked about the connection between Ocean and Limlayan, and so Oda answered with a story about Ocean perving on Limlayan while she was bathing, and Limlayan responded by throwing a knife at him. Given that she was obviously derobed, I can't help but wonder where she produced the knife from. Next was the statue of Limlayan in Aleport. Now, I've always speculated that this is Limlayan, but I don't think we get a hard confirmation anywhere in-game, so there you go. The question here was whether Limlayan is actually a mermaid, and the short answer is no. This, as with all the statues of the 12, it's the artist's idea that obviously resonates with the local seafaring folk whom worship her, and so that's the way she is depicted. Next was one of my favourite spots on Vilbran, the great skeletal Helios. This area was deep under sea and thrust up by tectonic activity, and the sea serpent here was evidently trapped when this happened. So this is not literally the body of Thalios, but named for the myth which we all know by now, that Limlayan created the serpents Thalios and Pericos to fill the oceans before binding them to the Swallowtail Rome, an enchanted travelling island that would keep the serpents out of the hands of those who would use them for evil ends. There was a cave in 1.0 named Thalios and Pericos that echoed this myth, and it is apparently very common for Eorzeans to refer to various myths in naming landmarks that they can't otherwise explain. I'll supplement this here for you. So Seal Rock appeared in 1.0 and was thought by local pirates to be the Swallowtail Rome, but we've discovered since that it's actually something pretty similar, an island manipulated by the Allagans to be capable of traveling the seas. It seems likely that this Seal Rock is the true origin of the Swallowtail Rome myth. Another fun fact that Koji tells us in the post is that the Laminsan Armageddon myth involves a future time that the serpents are released and drown the whole world, hence the term "till sea swallows all," implying that the preceding idea or statement will persist until the end of times. Fool's Falls. So apparently the Poor Maid's Mill used to be a functioning sawmill, and that trees lopped higher up Ogomoro would be sent floating downriver and topple over the falls into the pool below to be collected, and if you were fool enough to stand underneath the falls, you'd probably have a tree dropped on your head, hence the name. Koji and Oda wanted to talk about the long climb here, but they were running out of time, made a quick reference to the floating city of Nim before teleporting to Gridania. First stop in the 12's Wood was Black Tea Brook, a name taken from Windhurst in Final Fantasy XI. They talked about the names of things shared between 14 and 11, such as Popotos. Koji noticed that we have bananas instead of Pamamas, and Oda replied that Pamamas may yet be introduced from the Western continent, which we know for now as the New World, and it had better fucking not be Vana'diel. It's apparently weird in Bent Branch Meadows for a Chocobo Ranch to be flying a Moogle balloon. Apparently Yoshi P wanted to use this area for early meteor access and wanted it to feel just all the Final Fantasy by having Moogles and Chocobos and everything in it together. So the lore team had to come up with a story, and their idea was that the owner of the stables was rescued by a Moogle during the madness of the calamity, and in gratitude he flies the balloon and named the ranch Moogle's Gift Mounts. Next we have a hedge tree. I can't remember which one they stopped at, but here's a hedge tree. For anyone who doesn't know, these trees demarcate the boundary of the hedge, which is a magical barrier set up and sustained by the elementals and the Pajal, and one of the essential elements of the Green Pact. But this barrier has been greatly weakened by the calamity, which is why things like Garleans and Ixali have been able to get into the 12's Wood. Finally, we have Earth's Fount and some extrapolation on one of the greatest mysteries of the game so far, that is the Primal Odin. Most of us know of the myth of an Allagan woman named Earth who was slain by Odin, but it turns out that Earth was actually an enemy of Allag, and Odin was a hero that traveled from the north to save her, only to become possessed by the forbidden sword, Zantetsuken. So as many of us have speculated, it is the sword itself which is the true primal, or at least that which makes the primal, rather than the wielder itself. A final fun fact here is that the Japanese describe Odin as Tonshin, literally god of fighting, and that the warring triad are called Santonshin, or three gods of fighting. So now we have an implied relationship, at least in category, between Odin and the warring triad, which is quite interesting. And that was the end of the lore panel, but Koji says in the end of his post that the Japanese audience was apparently pretty keen on it, and that they'll consider doing a follow-up in the near future, possibly for the 3.0 areas, which would be great, provided we get a translation. But that's all from Koji, and that's also all from Ethys for now. Feel free to discuss below, and I know a lot of this moved pretty quickly, so if you have any further questions, leave a comment. I'll do my very best to answer for you. For now, stay beautiful, and I'll see you all very soon.